Interestingly, it did. It doesn't usually. Okay.
All right, if anyone's not ready, can I get a verbal cue? All right, perfect. Evidence when the U.S. and U.K. are part of a mutual defense agreement, pact binds together nuclear defense planning, Department of Defense 20. U.S. and U.K. nuclear republics have information exchange under the NBA collaboration of the respective scientific, military, and political focuses for the furtherance of mutual objectives. And this agreement is used to coordinate targeting of nuclear arsenals and to share nuclear weapons technology. China for U.S. and U.K. pledge to exchange information, nuclear defense plan, and release system military reactors allows for uranium, U.S. pass and warhead designs. And this was the U.S. and U.K. in blatant violation of the NPT, something known to non-nuclear signatories, both undermining NPT credibility and actively creating a double standard of proliferation, challenge, and entries for NPT obligations preclude technology transfer. The MDA actively promotes nuclear states to take steps to nuclear disarmament. MDA is contrary to NPT, which obliges nuclear weapon states not to transfer the nuclear capabilities to other states. Non-nuclear weapon states, parties to the NPT, have questioned the MDA. Mexico, on behalf of the New Agenda Coalition, reminding the conflict nuclear disarmament is not an option but a legal obligation. U.S. supported by the UK refused to acknowledge that the legal pose prior to the NBA. Don't remind the NPT contributes to the belief that both NPT and MDA are discriminatory, and the NPT is on the brink of breaches by the UK and US are core part of undermining its legitimacy. If taken public steps back to compliance, will bolster the NPT and undo the damage. The upcoming refining action pit like 18. NPT is crisis nuclear arms states has friend billions of dollars in the nuclear weapons since 95. Nuclear arms states have acted as if they had the rights to indefinite possession of nuclear weapons. Policy that practice that those consider themselves a U.S. nuclear umbrella healing divided the international community over nuclear weapons can only happen through systematic reduction of the policy that's the same. This means this will only answer the NPC question of the credibility against norms against prolif. In 2 years' time, NPC states will hold its next review. In 2020, these states will engage in concrete action to end their modernization programs, remove nuclear weapons from security reduction, and commit to multilateral nuclear disarmament and negotiations. And up in kind of strive or die for the NPT. Biggest issues failure of U.S. and UK engaged in own responsibility towards the treaty. Joshi 20. Diplomats will gather in red plans, signs of residence, even NATO allies. The country has missiles with North Korea, so say we can't have them complete again. Problem allied with NPT's mobility. America, Britain, treaty can be understood as a bargain. Nuclear happens agreed to around nuclear weapons in turn. Nuclear content agreed to negotiate towards giving up their bombs. And nuclear outlook of Article 6 assess kills the NPT. Past president improves Article 6 assess lets nuclear weapons band together, solving the RevCon 920. Parties may insist registering alarm at the RevCon back to NVS on Article 6 cooperation about the fight NPT and NVS in the past managed to work together effectively to promote RevCon success, adopting united front to defend their Article 6 implementation and termination of MDA is key to signal commitment to the NPT by the U.S. and U.K. is resolving this tension. Clause 17. MDA permitted the transfer between U.S. and U.K. control of nuclear information and conflict which both countries commit to the NPT. If the other country were fully implementing the treaty, MDA needs to suspend it. And NPT breakdown triggers widespread prolif fast code and 15. If any states have nuclear weapons, all states will seek them immediately. Prolif will snowball. This nuclear dominance is widely believed in there's substantial for it. In the absence of enforcement, spoiler states with nuclear weapons, prolif would be widespread. NPC decreases the willingness of spoilers to cheat. Offers empirical tests. Our answer is that most were not confident that superpowers would prolif voluntary forego weapons. NPC has to detect cheating and coordinate expectations. Widespread non-prolif. This strongly suggests regime that substantially prolif. And prolif ensures nuclear weapons turns the myth and increased arsenals ensures breakdown that triggers cascading nuclear conflict. Brash 18 deterrence lacks credibility. Deterrence requires each arsenal remains invulnerable. Deterrence assumes often irrationality. Presumes leaders will retain control, making decisions on base cool calculation. There's no way for military leaders to determine when their country is competing in the firepower. One who's willing to deny it cannot be deterred. One who's convinced that others hostility no weapons comes to fight. There's substantial risk with the escalated war, false alarms, leads retaliation attack that hadn't happened. There have been numerous broken arrow accidents. Thus, the plan we affirm the United States federal government should terminate the agreement between the government of the United States of America and the government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for cooperation on the uses of atomic energy for mutual defense purposes. Advantage 2. As part of the new defense strategy, UK has chosen to increase its nuclear stockpile and spur a new arms race. Goal 17. For the first time in 50 years, Britain wants to increase its nuclear stockpile, increasing global activity, challenge international order and proliferation, all pose a threat to the treaty to stability. Britain's defense reveals and equivalent wants to grow the stockpile. UK had signed the NPT, but Britain wants to reverse the trend that's helped keep the nuclear threat at bay. And UK is completely dependent on the MDA for nuclear arsenals. This plan is on the CMD 19. British also the charter its independent system reality is entirely dependent on the US and UK signed the MDA. As a result, UK's nuclear weapon systems are highly reliant on the US system comprises submarines and missiles and the warheads. At least when the US of the submarines is returned to the regular US of Kings Bay for the maintenance and replacement. The submarines are based on US submarines. Many of the system components are brought from the US. The gas produced in the US built with Trident, but their body shell from the US guidance system. Also in the US, Trident is relying on the US without approval from Washington. UK not use its nuclear weapon system. And Iran scenario: strong JCPO, self arms racing. The Robinson 225 revolver Iran's nuclear weapon system would escalate tension in the Middle East, raising conflict between Iran and Saudi Arabia. In the absence of agreement, Iran could produce enough nuclear material for a weapon in a few months. Israel had taken preemptive action Discussing nuclear facilities in Iraq and Syria. Saudi Arabia signaled to obtain a nuclear weapon if Iran successfully detonates one. And UK's increase in nuclear weapons causes Iran to arrest nuclear development, killing negotiations. Russia 327. An increase in nuclear warheads by 40% only caused Iran to rejuvenate its development and encourage Russia to build more weapons, knowing the credibility of the UN. And perception of Iran possessing nuclear weapons would cause Israel to launch a preemptive nuclear strike for 20. Israel is afraid to preempt Israel's missile defense are too sophisticated. If Iran appeared to be on the verge of making nuclear devices, Israel might consider a preventive nuclear attack. Israeli planners would no longer deem a conventional attack sufficiently lethal to destroy the Iranian program. And perception of Iranian buildup spurs destabilizing pro-life in the Middle East uniquely problematic. Julian Hushwitz, Tony. Should Iran raise further bombs, the U.S. and Israel will take preventive action, easily spiral to regional wars spur pro throughout the Middle East, and beginning with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia acquires nuclear bombs, the Middle East, Turkey would follow suit. And it goes global. Extinction, Barras 20. Nuclear crisis between Israel and enemy states will be regional no real with the nuclear conflict risk from pandemic variable to casually under serious threat produce existential outcomes within the Middle East spill over India, Pakistan, North Korea, and historic ties. Jerusalem could claim legality for allegedly defensive strike. Nuclear war must be terminal. Drown civilizational progress. And China scenario submarines. A, the UK building this nuclear arsenal undermines NPT and forthcoming recon. B, the new arsenal drastically increases tensions with Russia, increasing risk of miscalc. William 6. UK announces increases in nuclear stockpile. Increase could not have a worse time for nuclear diplomacy. In August 2021, states will gather a meeting for the NPT. It will be a chance for the UK to demonstrate its progress towards nuclear disarmament. UK concern about China review points to China's increasing international assertiveness ties with UK concerns in Hong Kong. Review change the country's declaratory policy to encompass China. UK aim to convince decision makers in Moscow and Beijing that the risk of miscalc too high to pursue aggression and increase the risk of misperception, undermines the global security, exacerbate tensions with sensors moving in the wrong direction. And modernization plans will increase military tensions with China in the Pacific. Morningstar 21. Defense review paves the way for greater aggression of government that puts poverty when trying to decide increase in the number of nuclear wars only reach a breach of Britain's obligation to NPT by a calculated insult to the world. Deployment military muscle to China sees military pensions in the Pacific. Warmongers about the green benches, including inflammatory positions. Security means defusing a rival British military can only undermine it. And these employments include nuclear submarines. Allison 21. Carrier strike of a nuclear submarine will be sorted by a nuclear submarine. Chinese believes SES should not become a seat of great power rivalry determined by warships. And in these crises, China will use cyber attacks against military targets. Segal 17. US is much likely to get Beijing to influence the chain directed military targets because they remain tied to regime survival and national security. Hackers break into networks of preparation for potential conflict. Chinese military often is right of the need to seize information dominance at the beginning stages of the conflict with the technology of advanced adversary to cyber attacks. PLA would also attempt to disrupt forces in the Western Pacific. Highly destructive attack might reduce chances that the US might get involved in the regional conflict. And UK submarines are uniquely vulnerable, leads to nuclear war. Outrunning England 17. Cyber attack on the UK's operation fleet of American class submarines with nuclear missiles could lead to catastrophic exchange of nuclear warheads directly. Very possibly could have a severe impact on strategic ability. Air gas systems claims are false. Physically, Australia did not prevent attacks from the inside of the prior injection of malware into warheads at the manufacturing and maiden stages. Reactions from shore could be used this within the case of Stuxnet. And pre-delegation means UK subs are unique to Zhao 18. UK officers could act according to the pre-written letter. It makes theoretically possible that the letter may give the submarine captain some flexibility about whether to launch missiles based on judgment. And extinction level 89. Scientists have joined in warning war could trigger nuclear winter weapons if one submarine are enough to destroy all life. And Russia scenario. UK's move to pro-lift has put UK Russia's rock bottom plan reverses course. AFP through to the run. Russian ambassador to Britain that Sunday the diplomatic ties between the countries were nearly dead after UK brought in Moscow threat. Integrated review painted a pessimistic outlook for relations with Russia. You are increasing the number of warheads by 40%. This is a violation of treaty. Russian minister Sergei Lavrov said the relations between Moscow and London are freezing point, and current deployment escalates. CNW ski dominant 18. Modernization, including 150 NW deployed throughout Europe. NPR explains the remit of nuclear weapons to deter against new scenarios. Conflict between the US and Russia will likely play out in Europe. Both states believe they can manage escalation rates. The possibility of nuclear use. New SBLM brings new risks. Attack on SSVM could be misinterpreted as a preventive strategic strike, easily escalate pursuit of new nuclear weapons, worsen tensions with Russia. And UK disarmament. UK disarmament eliminates the French arsenal, decreases TN in Eastern Europe, which routes down tensions with Russia independently. Beach 9. For not so nuclear weapons, this would make it hard for them to retain the cast a new light on the question of American nuclear weapons. This would give impetus for negotiating down the stockpile or Western weapons in Western Russia. Show that one major player was taking their obligation seriously. The principle holds getting rid of nuclear weapons is the right thing to do for Britain. We should go ahead regardless of what other states decide. And NATO-Russia war leads to large-scale annihilation, extinction. Majumdar 18. A war with Russia could go nuclear, kill billions. If a war were to break out between NATO and Russia, nuclear weapons could certainly come into play. If Russia were faced with a large-scale attack that could defeat conventional forces, a NATO counteroffensive would be fraught with escalatory risk. One of the probable outcomes of Russian invasion, Russian conventional forces would likely be severely damaged. Russia might counter advancing NATO forces with tactical nuclear weapons. And I'm ready for classics.
Alrighty, then let me start my timer really quick. Okay, So let's talk about your second advantage, your third scenario, right? So this like France is going to disarm because UK disarms. Why would France do that?
France is gonna disarm because why would France disarm?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if they see that the UK like starts to disarm, they would want to like act in good faith because it's like good credibility.
Sure. And if we've shared this nuclear information with the UK, how can we take that back?
Well, our plan is to stop the MDA like as it is.
Sure, but how do we take back the information that we've already given them?
You can't like take back information.
Okay, so why are they going to disarm?
I mean, they're going to disarm because they see that the UK and the US is going to disarm. So that makes it like
Oh,
that
the
they
US
don't
is going to
need.
disarm?
I mean,
Is that in your plan text?
the US and UK MDA to like stop the nuclear sharing.
Right. But is the US going to disarm?
Not in the plan as of right now.
But our plan is like a
Okay.
first step to global disarmament. If you affirm Article 6 of the NPT.
Sure. Okay. Why would Israel first strike Iran if they had nukes?
Because if they see Iran start to build up their nuclear arsenal, Israel would feel like threatened.
Sure, but wouldn't like Turkey strike them too? Or Pakistan?
Well, I mean, that's what we're saying, that if Saudi Arabia starts building up their nuclear arsenals, then Turkey will like build up theirs, and that's like the entire like advantages why we solve.
Okay. So let's talk about your Joshi 20 evidence. If the RevCon bright line was in 2020, why haven't your impacts been triggered yet?
Yeah, so they extended the RevCon to August of 2021, and that's
Sure, but like if the brink was last year, it doesn't matter if they moved the meeting. Like why?
The brink was only
Why is
last
that-
year because that's when the RevCon was scheduled, but because of COVID, it was rescheduled.
Why is the RevCon key?
RevCon is key. That's when all the countries like meet at the meeting to discuss their nuclear proliferation treaty and see whether or not like these countries are affirming the NPT and doing good faith to like not build up nuclear weapons, which is why the US and UK engaging in this nuclear targeting is harmful.
Are there other countries with nukes?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Then let's talk about like, is there any provision in the MDA that makes the U.S. come to the United Kingdom's aid in the event of an attack?
Yeah, so they have like nuclear targeting, and they also do like war planning.
Right. But planning's not the same as helping someone. Do they help them?
Well, yeah, nuclear targeting.
Okay, we can have a debate about that. That's time. 1 and C is being sent.
The order is 4 off and then advantage 1, advantage 2. Has everybody received the doc? All right, Houston, have you received the doc?
Not yet. Oh, it says there's an error.
All right, so Houston has it. Do judges have it that need it? All right, Judge Morris, Judge Mag, and Judge Wash, everybody have it? All right, then I will get started then.
First off, on T, defense treaties are legally dissent from alliance agreement. Defense pacts are those for promising assistance in event of a conflict. Burner 19. A defense treaty is a legal agreement intended to regulate military activities with the definition of defense pact alliances to promise of assistance in a conflict initiated by a third party state against a member. And activation requires action that triggers the defense pact. Fleet 19. Seal initiative to review the MDT activation is what action would trigger the treaty. Violation of the U.S. UK MDA is not an alliance. It does not promise to defend each other and does not have a mechanism for activation because there's nothing there to activate. Vote neg 1 limits. There is infinite tactical adjustment. U.S. defense agreements are totally distinct from our alliance. 2 ground. They make debate about defensive agreements, not alliance. That distorts the literature and lets them no link out of negative research by saying they don't alter our treaty commitments. Next off is the infrastructure dissent. Finance focus on infrastructure now. Paul 21. COVID-19 pandemic has caused commerce to break and strain the service little infrastructure on which it all rides on. This may be the year that we finally address the Biden plan to spend a lot of term political effort to make that happen with this Build Back Better plan and infrastructure bill bills key to upgrade the grid. Ward 21. Observers expect Biden's infrastructure legislation to provide many of the same measures as he recommended on the Cambridge Control when he proposed a $2 trillion infrastructure package that focused on large infrastructure designed to address climate change, including investments in upgrading electrical grid, new transmission lines, energy storage, and grid failure causes modern civilization, collapses modern civilization. More 21. Electricity is a central part of modern life and important in many basic services, including healthcare, transportation, water. By climate change accelerates the electrical system and more frequently extreme weather events that could overlap outdated infrastructure to fail potentially, leaving millions of people without heat and other essentials in life-threatening conditions. Next off is the Paris dissent. Biden recommitted to Paris, but his credibility, U.S. leadership, depending on security methods, is key. The plan, Taco 20. This may not be easy job to pick up the pieces of Trump's foreign policy that left the United States alienated and battered credibility, having trade alliances. The time to overcome Sandy Washington be trusted and honor commitments. Allies question of the U.S. security commitments and equal version of the sources not limited security. U.S. has less credibility. Biden will not come to the media signs of restored U.S. leadership by reversing the decision checks of the economic Paris, coupled with the resolve to recommit to alliances. The new administration will be welcome with uncertain remain over the extent of the U.S. will expire the leadership as if that had been Trump's application or something else to come. America who wants to be a leader overcome the skepticism is going to take time. And U.S. leadership is key to Paris success. Solves warning. Barron Daily 20. U.S. international leadership and climate change jobs large all would drag on the international action and would allow for other countries to say, look, the U.S. largest emitter, richest in land, isn't acting. Why should we? If this is going to be completely changed, U.S. is going to become a leader. This is a major effort in mobilizing the action. And climate change causes extinction. Best studies. Brad Dunlop 19. Hot house theories have realized that 35% of global land is subject to lethal condition beyond the threshold of human survival, devastating whether wildfire or heat waves, drought, and desertification, severe ecosystem collapse of region have become unviable. Land and degradation by the hill. Ag becomes non-viable. Extreme weather events, food production, and shortages, chronic water shortages, too hard for many human action. World the most populous cities are banning for 2 degrees of warming. High likelihood of human civilization coming in. Next off is the counterpoint. The United States Congress should enact legislation. The United States will no longer fulfill obligation under the alliance agreements by leaving the MDA with the UK. The counterpoint solves the whole effect congressional breach. NC lines of Pennsylvania causes follow on. Bradley 18. President Monroe terminated the domestic defense treaty without the ILO. President likes the third two presidents shall 37 Congress ended the domestic defense treaty with the U.S. remains part 2 Congress in place. United States in breach of pursuant by the time statute enacted after the treaty law. If the statute conflicts or treaties or statutes attack the law, Congress can alter the control of law. Congress involved itself in termination basics. Legislative direct states to terminate entry South Africa and Secretary of State. Another example was the TEA Congress Congress directed the president to withdraw terminating Congress can regulate and the process of taking an independent congressional role prevents unchecked presidential power. The Constitution defends leaving foreign powers. The Constitution silently regarding termination. Analysis of the Constitution existing case all demonstrates the Congress can eliminate termination power by enacting legislation over President. Congress has the authority to direct the president to deliver termination. It is not inconceivable the president would stand up for Congress without termination. The president would you not continue the president's passive only going recent decades through Congress accurate and when Congress was to assert that the Constitution moral authority and maintain the role of U.S. foreign policy and solve multiple scenarios for nuclear war. Push 18. Like to attribute Congress' role to cede the power to the president, the ability to start wars anyway, use nuclear weapons to Trump as the second remaining appeal to the presidency. Congress must reassert authority. Washington is fighting in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria strikes that have resulted in escalation down there, prove U.S. Russian limited wars with America faces the major conflict with no Iran, Russia, China. Congress must reassert before too late. On the case advantage 1. MDA doesn't violate the NPT. Mails 14. The terms and conditions of the MDA do not violate the nuclear weapons device, nor they contravene the NPT movements under the MDA do not involve nuclear weapons or nuclear explosive movements, and they are not contravening the treaty. Supporters of the MDA have also referred to Article 5 of the MDA itself, which prohibits threats of atomic weapons by either party. The MDA remains consistent with the NPT, and the C&D card in the second event shows that the UK is dependent on the US, and MDA is vital. UK maintaining its independent nuclear deterrent. Areas 20. The United Kingdom nuclear forces strongly dependent on the material program as the United States. The role of Navy deploys nuclear armed submarines equipped with the US maintain tried 2 D5 new submarines launch ballistic missiles will be by cooperation of war matters including the transfer of the United Kingdom special nuclear material non-nuclear weapons components is authorized by the 1958 US UK mutual defense agreement, and the independent UK nuclear deterrent is key to prevent miscalculation and nuclear strikes on British cities that kills millions. Lose their way. The United Kingdom and the United States have stood together. Lose their way. The United Kingdom and the United States have stood along together in national conflict. Prospects would be less from nuclear regarding enemy regarding the safety of threat attacks. Small with the two danger of rising possible miscalculation my aggressor thinking the U.S. would not be able to respond to any kind of mass destruction weapons on the British seas. Advantage 2, raising the stockpile limit is a political ruse. New weapons will never be built. Harris 21, increasing the cap does not necessarily mean the Ukraine will actually build more weapons. The nuclear issues, increasing the paper does not need to be followed through on practice because it is designed to look opposition leaders' term. It's targeting leaders of the Labour Party weak. Nuclear spy rather than a government's cut support. Our president similarly skeptical about the newer warheads will be built. We all being taken for that. And U.S.-UK relations are tight because UK's strategic view that France Russia is an enemy, which the plan can't solve for. Liberty means blue. Russian ambassador to Britain, ties between the two countries are nearly dead after UK's strategic view this week in Moscow as an acute threat. Marnov said the relationship between Moscow and London are at a freezing point. As British authorities have pursued tough anti-Russian course in recent years, and France is never going to give us nuclear weapons. France's nuclear forces are updated frequently. France enjoys the popular support nuclear deterrence. France has Swedish nuclear weapons vital for getting independence from the U.S. to guarantee the First World War in 1940 will not repeat themselves. And Netanyahu isn't going to unilaterally strike Iran. Military last 21, despite the imagining likes of Project NATO, U.S. proven consistently risk averse when it comes to making war. Netanyahu's devoted on West campaigns in Lebanon against Hamas and against Gaza. An attack with the compelling rationale to isolate Israel and Iran. American Netanyahu's greatest war. Netanyahu's inherent caution means he never surprised Washington would never want the administration that is not likely to have him by his more interested in encouraging Iran that attacking and status quo U.S.-Iran relation negotiations will fail. Hanslow 21. A question remains about whether the seriousness of the purpose and intent of coming back to compliance use as should have been prosecuted to Iran. Iranian officials have maintained the U.S. must lift all Trump sanctions to return to nuclear deal before its compliance to the gun. Public views of the vast cabinet on whether Sharon truly intends to return to compliance. And no AI sub impacts the fake news. Kanani 18. China's taking AI sub South China seeing more to post quotes. It is notable that researchers were discussing English language in the West paper owned by a lot of their powers attended such to restore the receive the attention this should be considered a technological propaganda. They hides and overstates the development of sources or must be cavity must be cavitated heavily. And no cyber impact. Warts 18. Cyber wars hype imaginary academics industry to perform in cyber conflict was eliminated. The scope of severity is characterized as hooliganism and this produced no impact. Real damage is very difficult. Exploits bleeding. Aggressive viruses can be repackaged, returned to center because predicting impact is not difficult for states to exhibit the weapons that produce unilateral damage not embraced by professionals. Observers fail to stipulate the progress of the setting, and no one has yet. And having nuclear weapons allow us for weaker nations to protect themselves and create more peaceful environment. Shown number 18. No nation with nuclear weapons have ever been invaded by another nation. The number of deaths in the battle is declined by 95% in 70 years since the invention and spread of nuclear weapons. India, Pakistan civilization and security force disputed territories has declined 95% after Pakistan's first nuclear weapons in 1998. And these bombs were forced together. India, Pakistan required them only far more limited conflict, and China dramatically less bellicose after acquiring bomb when facing off against nuclear nations. Elites can no longer sacrifice the poor and weaken the country without risking their own lives. And proliferation decreases the cost of energy turn. Proliferation decreases the cost of developing nuclear energy. Slotsky 16. Anti-proliferation favors the world by economic development, increases the cost of nuclear energy proposed by Intel. Benefit no country should be able to enrich uranium, plutonium, resulting in this missile of video finish may be impossible to reduce the cost of nuclear energy without cutting laser supplies. And nuclear energy solves global climate change. Tradition now is key to avoid action at all 19. Nuclear energy must be well mitigate climate change to avoid catastrophic consequences. No point of no return carbon dioxide. Highest levels of millions of years. Emerging economies planning with coal burning power plants and reducing emission lines. And nuclear energy demand new means not be with emissions. Nuclear energy smaller footprint with SPL more favorable intensive meeting would require dramatic increase. Problems can be solved by new strategies to close nuclear fuel cycle. Public incentives require humanity would receive consequences for irreparable harm. And the consensus of studies prove that it's more stabilizing prevents actions of war. Schrenner 9. A balloon fever has a massive extraordinary collection of nuclear missiles and insufficient to cooperate and imagine the company's official right to report the incidents based on her reports. Sometimes the customers are experienced with research to conclude the recent offense new accident was not associated with a high likelihood of actual accident. Institutions not substitute for just as opposite would be skinny. Just to prove the jolt for drivers, they will crash, making the less cars. So is with proliferation. I am skipping down to the and Iranian pro-left leads to strong conflict in the Middle East, specifically with Israel and Sunni states. And less than 15. The perception that Iranian nuclear program is a momentum of growing strategic threat has to directly increase cooperation between coordination among the Sunni Arab states. Israel's budget accidentally disclosed the secret diplomatic mission and the Persian goal, and the Persian mission and analysis considered designed to foster cooperation between Israel and Sunni Arab states regarding the Iranian nuclear question. The increased cooperation is driven by widely held perception. I've got to call it a perception. I did not read the no risk of miscalculation 11 card. Ready for cross 6.
All right. Is your counterplan conditional?
It is conditional.
All right. Thank you. And can you again explain what defense pacts mean to you?
A defense pact
In your
means our definition is about that. Specifically, it has to be how the activation is triggered and how defense commitments and defense treaties are different and distinct. And our definition is about the activation of that. The violation is that the MDA with the US and UK has zero to do with activation.
How does it have to do zero with activation?
It can't be activated.
Because the MDA agreement cannot be activated. It's just info sharing. There's no reason why it can be. It just exists. It can't be activated. The whole point of this topic is to reduce either the defense pacts or the way that they can be activated.
And it's not it doesn't assistance in conflict.
And it's an assistance in the event of a conflict, not just assistance in info sharing.
So why exactly like is the infrastructure bill like exclusive to our plan?
Specifically is that doing the plan is going to divert political capital away from Biden, which he's going to have to focus on in order to be able to push this infrastructure bill through. The link is that the plan is going to drive Biden's political capital away, and he's having to focus on that and not infrastructure.
Political capital away from the MDA.
Away from Biden, like Biden's gonna have to his laser-like focus is he's gonna have to focus on infrastructure, and he's not gonna be able to focus on like this MDA agreement when he needs to be focused on infrastructure to solve for these grid impacts, because the world relies on this grid and is very vulnerable to climate change.
So how do you know that Biden's gonna only focus on infrastructure?
The first two cards I read on that are questions like Biden, like the Apollo 21 is pretty specific. That
Yeah, but
Biden
it doesn't talk about Biden specifically. It just says COVID.
Yeah, it's a COVID, like even like the World War 21 card. Like, yeah, the Apollo 21 is really like the bottom of the card is talking about how Biden is like proposing this plan, this infrastructure bill is on his campaign trail. He is focused on doing this infrastructure.
Okay, so your third off, how you have like no card that talks specifically about Paris and like how it'll solve warming, and you're like Baradelli 20, like what does Paris do?
Well, Paris is the climate. It's the Paris Climate Accord that Biden has recommitted to. That's specifically our Tanakh 20 card. He's recommitted to this Paris agreement, but
What does Paris do?
Paris is the Paris Climate Accord is a movement by multiple countries as a method to propose for solving for climate change. Biden recommitted.
What are the methods? Do you have
it's like reducing emissions and stuff like that. But specifically, the link is that your credibility of U.S. will go down as a result of the plan. Thus, Paris won't be effective.
All right, taking prep. Yeah. stopping prep, sending the 1NC. The prep time is, we use 616 or 1AC, 2AC. Okay, it should be sent now. So just to give a quick roadmap, I'll be doing a case overview and then the line by line, and then the off case will be in the order of the 1NC. Has everyone received it? Yes, judges and the other debaters. All right. Get my timer. All right. Starting in 3. Oh, my thing closed. Okay, starting in 3, 2, 1. Our plan effectively gets rid of the U.S.-UK nuclear sharing via the MDA and reaffirms the NPT through these means. Extending advantage 1. Chamberlain Butler to Andrew explains that the NPT prevents tech transfer, while the MDA promotes tech transfer, effectively breaking the rules of the NPT. This empirical evidence is backed by the members of the British Security Council. If the NPT does break down, countries will want to accumulate these nuclear weapons. This means that we provide clear solvency for cascading proliferation by repealing the MDA barrages that the proliferation will ensure nuclear war, which will end the world as we know it right now. Extending advantage 2. The UK recently decided to increase its nukes, which is a slap in the face to the NPT signatories. There are 3 scenarios. 1. UK prolif means that Iran will reinvest in nuclear development. That's a Mercer. Farley 20 said that this will lead to Israel launching a preemptive nuke strike, which will then snowball into Saudi Arabia and Turkey to prolif as well. That's Shilton and Hashkovsky. And 2, this increases tensions with with China. That's Williams, leading to cyber attacks and nuke wars. That's a Baimov and Ingram. And 3, this escalates tensions with Russia, leading to nuke miscalc in NATO. And then NATO launches a counteroffensive that kills Williams. That's William and Majumdar. Prefer probabilistic impacts, which will happen if we don't enact plan 1. Nukes are bad. Prolif leads to nuclear war. That's our barrage card. And 2, we've already isolated 3 impact scenarios that can happen if the UK increases its stockpile. And 3, nuclear war leads to extinction. Those are Barris 20, Libel 89, and Majumdar 18 cards. And on to the line by line answers to Mills and Lewis. Cross-supplier 1AC, Joshi and Kaihan extensions of MDA route because against their Mills. These Mills and Lewis cards are from 7 and 13 years ago, which don't reflect the UK's new strategy to build its stockpiles, which leads to an arm race. That's Galt's 21. We impact turn their UK to turn. It's bad to have a nuclear arsenal. Cross-supply Williams and AFP, UK Russia relations are souring, which leads to extinction. That's Majumdar 18. Also, our Barrage 18 card states deterrence fails because it assumes optimal rationality. And onto the second advantage, they say that the MDA doesn't violate NPT, but prefer our Chamberlain evidence that NPT obligations preclude technology transfer. The MDA in stark contrast actively promotes it. Answers to the US-UK turn. Our 1AC is all about the current relationship and is harmful and leads to proliferation among Iran and Russia and China. The UK's deterrence uniquely links to our impacts. Their Ward 16 says that UK deters Russia and China, but our William 6 and AFP 21 indicates the UK's new defense that increases tensions. Prefer evidence because it's from this year. It's more recent. Ireland thefts tensions. McKinnon and Quinn 20. Biden's Irish ruler, cornerstone of his self-setting nerves on edge that Britain can find the relationship a little less special. Biden hates the UK. Johnson's warm relationship with Trump could put him on the back of the foot, widening the gap. A number of lords describe the Harris as simply the Indian. Biden has made clear his red line is Ireland. The border has become a major sticking point. And Meghan Markle stumps relations. Ferguson 21. Markle's follow is damaging U.S.-UK relations. An expert has claimed the interview has been dubbed the monarchy's worst crisis since the abdication. The spat is worsening relations across the pond. And onto off case. 1, we meet. It's a mutual defense agreement that obligates both parties to to aid in defense plan and other vital information sharing, and is called a defense pact by experts. Morley 14, a 1958 mutual defense pact between the two countries that allowed transfer of nuclear technology, the development of defense plans, evaluation of potential enemy capability. And 2, we meet. The MDA controls joint targeting and policy planning for nuclear responses to an attack, makes it definitionally a defense pact. Miller 08, British officers were targeting nuclear targeting and discussion in the US-UK policy nuclear channel with the center to be established at Stockholm Security and like to the special relationship established by the MDA cooperation on the US and the United Kingdom on nuclear matters, both senior level policy channel and operational linkage between target matters. And 1, counterinterpretation. Defense pacts are specific and bounded on agreements on military cooperation and defense capabilities, don't require security guarantees. Rappaport 15, defense pacts characterize and one state promises to aid to another defense. Expectations are narrow and specifically bounded, may be symmetric or asymmetric in terms of treaty obligations. And 2, counterinterpretation. We meet their definition about the guarantee. Their definition about security guarantees are a subset of defense pacts and are not interchangeable with the whole. Defense pacts can be limited in scope and limited in promises of aid. Rappaport 15, security guarantee explicitly states an attack on one would be an attack on all. Some defense pacts apply to a certain contingency, some only promise consultation. Security guarantees are a subset of defense pact. The 2 categories are not interchangeable. Reasons to refer: 1, they limit the killed Japan, Philippines, and South Korea planes because they face none of those treaties meet their definition, puts them in a double bind. Either they're right and there's no topic, or they're wrong and we have to be topical. Rappaport 15, U.S. Philippines Defense Treaty parties agree would be in danger in accordance with its constitutional process. Language adopted for the U.S. Japan, the U.S. South Korea's language is chosen to preempt the United States committing itself. And 2, we maintain limits. There are 4 defense pacts with NATO member states: NATO, the U.S. Turkish DECA, and the U.S. UK MDA and NORAD. Don't believe their hyperventilation if they can't produce treaty text that would be topical. And 3, our interpretation is better for education, provides better context, provides follows the topic better, broader education about U.S. commitments, Trump's education about NATO for real world education and for preventing a still topic by next week. And 4, no in-round abuse. You get nuclear terror, and this adds UK relations deterrence amongst a lot else. Not our fault they didn't do the research. And 2, 1, there's no onto their DA. 1, there's no reason why Biden can't pass plans on infrastructure and do the plan. They talk about political capital and CX, but that assumes presidents only focus on one thing at a time. And 2, their Wordland says that they expect the grid to include things that merely address climate change. And 3, their more only refers to electricity, not the grid itself. Even if Biden doesn't pass infrastructure legislation, doesn't mean that we'll lose all electricity. And 4, China thumps. It's Biden's priority. Diplomatic resources that are being sent directly from the Middle East to Asia. Pager 21. Biden's pivoting the Asia restructure. The national security staff in the Middle East and Asia director is downsizing the team devoted to the Middle East. The latest sign that the administration will prioritize Asia and foreign policy. Indo-Pacific coordinator Campbell's domain is growing while the Middle East coordinator will be more limited. Biden and his team believe the biggest security challenges will emerge from China, and they're shifting their resources accordingly. And Biden plan is widely insufficient and still politically unattainable. Jane Martindale 20. Biden isn't willing to confront the status quo. He's fine with investing, but not confronting the fossil fuel industry. He's relying on tech. No evidence can be scaled up. This plan is better, makes you feel like that they're going to do something. The problem is something is still a catastrophe. Plans don't mean anything without a movement. Not even this competitive Republicans don't abolish the filibuster. And on to their next DA. 1, no link. They don't have specific cards that say that the U.S. UK MDA will decrease U.S. credibility. In fact, the plan increases U.S. credibility because it shows that we can actually commit to the U.S. can actually commit to the NPT. And 2, the Paris Agreement doesn't actually do anything for warming. Their Barradelli card literally talks nothing about Paris. All that Biden's done for climate change is say that science is real. They're power tagging. And 3, means that they have no access to their extinction impact. They can't solve. And onto the counter plan. 1, perm do both. And 2, perm do the CP. And 3, the net benefit links the executive must inevitably act. Trump means that there's always perception and blame. And 4, flexible executive power involves terrorism, rogue states, and WMD pro-lift. Our Constitution favors presidential act in war. Radical change could seriously threaten American national security and forestall another 9/11 or strike terrorists or rogue nations. And the executive needs flexibility. The liberation will come at the price of speed and secrecy. As we confront terrorism, rogue nations, and WMD proliferation, now is not the time to introduce sweeping antecedent changes. And 5, Supreme Court rulings prove Congress can't force the executive. Co-18 and INS and v. Chada, the court made clear that the Congress cannot affect the rights of the persons outside the legislative branch. In the acts of a joint resolution, it is presented to the president by his signature or veto. Congress can pass a law ex ante opposing the president's effort to unilaterally withdraw. And 6, normal war means war turn. The executive can terminate. The only way Congress can terminate treaties is via a declaration of war. Gigantic impact turn to their CP. Only the perm resolves war 12. Senate acting is derived from the judicial dicta and academic connotations, offering little unprecedented Colorado, relying on the only previous presidents is misleading, anecdating the development of clear lines, constitutional authority, and foreign affairs. The Senate can make no claim that could force a recalcitrant president to terminate a treaty. Congress has no institutional authority to independently terminate a treaty. And cut the rest of this card here, and cut number 7, and they say that Francis won't give up. Oh, it doesn't matter if Netanyahu isn't unilaterally striking. Once they see Iran prolife, Israel will follow suit. They say that France won't give up its nuke, but it's that perception that matters. Even if they win this, the world is still net worse without the NPT. They say that prolife is good because our Bears card says the prolife causes nuclear extinction. They try to energy turn, but just because it costs less to develop nuclear energy doesn't mean that climate change will be solved with no internal link. And Iran prolife causes cascade prolife. It doesn't strengthen the Mideast and destabilizing that Shilton and Hachovsky. And time, and so I didn't read 7 and the counter plan, and
All right, that's good. I'm ready to start cross-ex if you are.
oh yeah.
All right, so first off, in this Meghan Markle thumps, how does an actress thump the complete of UK and US relations?
Well, you've already seen how the UK has reacted to Meghan Markle's and Harry's Prince Harry's marriage, and our card specifically says that she is damaging US-UK relations because yeah.
All right, that's fine. All right, so moving on to T, your counterinterpret definition is from Raphofer 15. It is literally talking about defense commitments in the context of they needing to be activated and them being specific to stuff. So how do you meet your counterinterpretation?
Well, we meet our counterinterpretation because we're saying that
I mean, they engage in like joint targeting, policy planning, war planning, and like in response to an attack. And so our Miller 8 says, so it says like definitionally it's a defense pact because they have another leg to the special relationship established by the MDA.
Right, and so again, so like your arguments of not subset security agreements as a whole, how is your AF not a subset?
because it's like the aggregation of defense capabilities with the US and UK MDA.
But you say further down that there's different agreements with NATO countries. So again, how is the MDA not a subset of the MDT with NATO countries? Like, how do you meet your own counterinterpretation?
Well, we meet our own counterinterpretation because we're saying that these security guarantees are a subset we're saying that these defense pacts are like a aggregation of defense capabilities, and the MDA specifically, that where we like do nuclear sharing and info sharing as well.
All right, that's good. So on to the counter plan. Was there any reasons to reject the team? Because you did not read that agent stuff, correct?
Yeah, I didn't.
All right, and the perms was perm to both and perm to the CP, correct?
Yes.
All right, so you're on your Supreme Court ruling, your Co-18 evidence. How does the Supreme Court reign in the president? So if Supreme Court can't rule in the president, how is Congress? So if the Congress can't reign in the executive, how can the Supreme Court reign in the executive? On your Co-18 card.
The Congress could pass the law ex ante that like opposes the president.
So you're saying in that card that Congress can override the executive?
No, they can't. Like that's the
Why
entire
not?
card.
Why not?
They can't affect the rights or persons outside the legislative branch unless it's joint.
That's good. We're gonna start 10 minutes of prep now. All right, stopping prep, 5:30 left for the neg. The doc's being sent now.
Alrighty, and while we're waiting on that to come out, the doc's been sent. The order is going to be T and then the counter plan. Sorry, Jackson. Thank you. Alrighty, if I could get a thumbs up or a verbal confirmation when y'all receive that document. Thank you, Judge Morris. I see you. Thanks, Judge Wash, Judge Mag. Houston, do y'all have it?
It's loading.
Okay. Houston, did y'all receive it? Have it open? Awesome. Okay. Then again, order is going to be T, counter plan. Alrighty. Then if everyone's ready, I'll get started. First FTR interpretation is simple. Topical affirmatives have to reduce alliance commitments by limiting conditions of activation. They do not meet the US-UK MDA is not a defense pact or an alliance commitment. The MDA is a defense agreement that is not an alliance because nowhere in the agreement does it obligate the US to defend the UK in the event of a conflict. The resolution is clear. The topical affirmatives have to limit the conditions of activation. For example, Japan can activate Article 5 to make us defend the Senkakus. NATO member states can activate our defense agreements to defend the Baltics. The Philippines can activate the MDT to defend the SCS, but the MDA does not even have a process for activation because it's not an alliance. It only facilitates sharing information and nuclear technology, which is completely distinct from a promise to defend another country when they're attacked, including affirmatives that are not alliance commitments. Deletes any role for the neg debate. 2 impacts. 1, limits. Their interpretation of the topic justifies any defense agreement we have ever made with the country. The resolution, for example, teams could end the EDCA with a defense agreement between the US and the Philippines to allow for basing the SCS. Teams could read an after inter agreement with the OPCON in South Korea, or read an affirmative that ender defense agreement with Turkey over nuclear basing, or defense agreements to integrate our cyber capabilities with Estonia. These are important agreements with huge literature bases that are all allowed under their interp limits outweigh a smaller topic incentivizes nuanced debates, reciprocal innovation, in-depth discussions, of topic controversy, rigorous testing, which is the only thing that distinguishes debate from other activities. The alternative incentivizes the shift to hypergenerics. Debates value derives from its competitive nature because it motivates argument innovation within resolutional confines that produces better debates. The core locus points of contestation, the content of the topic is controlled by the affirmative, but the depth of the discussion and clashes left up to the negative, which means a good interpretation of debates must facilitate that engagement to ground. Their interpretation allows for affirmative that strategically no link every topic to DAs because teams do not have to reduce alliance commitments. For example, deterrence and assurance DA are based on our defense agreements to defend a country. For example, we do not defend the Baltics and Russia would attack that we don't defend Japan countries to proliferate. That does not apply to this affirmative because the MDA keeps our defense agreement and defend the UK. In the world of this affirmative, we would still defend the UK. This justifies teams breaking 10 into on topical laughs and quarter semis and finals of CEDA that do not only spike DAs but also K-links and other critical advocacies because they skirt topic controversy. You should fill their topicality through models of debate and visions of the topic. Even if you think this affirmative was debatable or even if they've been reading it for a long time, we win that our interpretation of the topic is better and that they are not topical. You should vote negative. Answer to their we meet. They do not meet our interpretation to the topic. Yes, the MDA is an agreement that we have with the UK, who is in NATO, but does not mean it's an alliance. Our evidence is very clear. The defense pacts and limiting activation must be a promise to defend each other in the event of a conflict, which is not the MDA. The framing of the issue for this is that in the world that the UK can still activate Article 5 of NATO alliance for any reason, which proves the MDA is totally a separate thing from our alliance commitments. Alliance commitments are defense pacts to support each other when attacked. We have 16 alliance commitment parties to a defensive agreement vow to support each other in the event that one or more of them attack. And answer to their counter interpretation. Their rapid evidence is neg evidence. Both cards they have read support our interpretation that they have to defend each other in the event of a conflict. Security guarantees are a part of defending defense host, but they do not change any part of the defense pact nor the security guarantees, which means they don't meet their own interp. Their 2AC quote says defense pacts are specific about agreements of military cooperation, but none of their evidence seems to say a word of even says the word military cooperation or anything about the app. This means there's no precision to the DA. There's a precision DA to their counterinterp if they try to explain their counterinterp following the affirmative, because it's not justified by a single piece of evidence that either team has read and allows for completely arbitrary reasons of the topic that are contextual to how the legal scholar and expert define a line. To overlimit, we don't overlimit the topic for a core topic to caucus politics, the SES burden sharing enlargement. Our interp allows for basically every policy F at this term besides one that are blatantly not alliances. Our interp means Japan, Philippines, and South Korea are not topical. That's false. We have an alliance commitment where we have promised to defend those countries through our MDT, which is how you reduce to meet our interp limits. That way, even if innovation and learning about these things in their F is good, the next structural inability to prepare on a wide topic outweighs any impact that could have had this argument. And they say they solve limits. They don't. There are literally hundreds of defense agreements which you have with countries such as agreements over trade, technology, cyber, and space. Their app is about nuclear weapons, so it might seem like it's an alliance commitment, but it's really just a totally separate agreement. And education, their interpretation is the worst for education. Explodes hundreds of affirmatives and makes negs, generics, and non-starter, which forces negs into generics and skirts topic clash military cooperation like the MDA might be interesting or educational, but it does not mean it should be included under the limited interpretation of the topic. And there's no reason why the MDA is uniquely topical. TVA solves topical affirmatives under our interpretation. Could read asked about the UK ending our promise to defend them and read the advantage about the MDA and the MDT, which access to the same education while allowing the negative say in the same game. Two, answer to the no round in round abuse. One, that's wrong. We can't get good assurance and deterrence links. We didn't even read an assurance DA because there's literally no links. This is why the MDA is key to treaty credibility. We should not have to shoot ourselves in the foot by reading a DA, letting them no link to prove abuse. Two, topicalities about this is not about this round, but setting a good model for debate, which is why in round abuse is a bad standard. Three, just because we cut a case today or have some cards with our F does not mean they were topical. We should not have had to preset a bad one and C to prove they were not topical. Four, the 2AC said we should read the nuclear terror DA, which proves how problematic their version of the topic is. Answer two, reasonability, not reasonable. Offense proves in combination of reasonable, absolute, untenable for the neg. A subjective and arbitrary mandates that judge intervention which destroys the activity. Real world, there's only one correct definition of defense spec, and reasonability is a logical T. Debates are substance, understanding of legal standards, and comparing as real world education, and T comes first. Okay, Congress kind of plan. The CB solves the case that Congress enacted legislation that directed the president to reduce commitments as a result of the same outcome because the president will comply but competes because it's legally distinct to the president. It's the sole organ capable of reducing international agreements. It solves even if the president doesn't respond to one and nullifies the effect in the last in time rule means superseding legislation renders the domestic effect null and void. U.S. will never act on commitments, even if they remit its technical elements of international law. It's the same functional result because everyone knows domestic law overrides. That's Bradley. Okay, moving on to perm to both. Skip it now. Do both means the president eliminating the international commitment of Congress legislating against domestic law simultaneously. Anything else is either severance or intrinsic. Both are voting issues, not a complete 2AC argument. No new one air spin controls sandbagging excuse. It doesn't solve leadership. One, independence. Congress mistake on its own role to prevent unchecked power. The CP does that by overriding Biden, but the perm alliance policy removing the conflict as wolf. Timing, it looks coordinated since they both act at the same time. Only the CP has Congress go first in taking the lead. Conflict, the perm eliminates Congress's ability to override preclusive claims to CAC authority. That's key. Barony and admin or get the press has all authority to disregard laws and individual discretion. This precipitate conflict. The key issues no longer authority when Congress has no limits. Authority at its lowest at application no longer illuminates main data lines. Future admins can accept a congressional control or cast law with preclusive claims of risk as claims to influence constraints practice could be set aside by preventing congressional engagement as a workable force. Workable forgetting will be far less likely to occur. Moving down to perm to the CP. Perm to the CP suffers the CP's distinct actions and does not alter commitments. Not only there are domestic legal effect of reduction of commitments is dictated by procedures of international law like invocation of exit clauses and form of diplomatic legislation does not do that, creating a breach that leaves our status of party remaining. That's Bradley. Only the president as a sole organ can reduce Congress can only change domestic effect. Bradley 14. Enacted later in time statute law status will continue the U.S. may have to breach. Congress has the ability to terminate domestic but not to treaty. President has been the sole organ of communications form of diplomatic functions of the role, meaning neither Congress nor can effectuate that by themselves in termination. Okay. Commitments are a matter of international law and changed by two methods. Extra or breach. The plainest form of the CP is the latter distinction at the heart of the topic. Helper 5. ILS provisions permanent exit from a treaty, otherwise force a lawful mechanism to terminate applications, and many conflict exit with failure to comply. Exit requires the state to inform partners of the Senate to withdraw the public act contrast with the exit. Unlike breach internationally lawful exit is important aspect of the issues that lie at the heart of governance scholars. Eluded key distinctions. Okay, moving down. Two links to the net benefit. They say the president must inevitably act as always executive action, and that's why it links to the internal. But again, the Congress is still pressuring Biden to follow on, which is the process of staking out power. It's something to the effect that the executive is bad on its own. It's the executive is bad. The executive on its own is bad, and creating the check of Congress, forcing the executive to do something is the internal net benefit. Answer two: executive flex no link to their congressional power does not mean no executive authority. Just a balance of it is entirely unchecked. Now the CP just reverses the historical norm, not an inverse of lopsided control. There warrant of speed, and that's wrong. It creates counterproductive groupthink. Strike 8. When you discuss its flexi, it creates a false dilemma. Congress can move quickly, search a step every 11 photos of authorities, force president not always react with speed. Decisions in the short term made limited options in the long run. The president's decision is superior, overstates the case. Even talented secretaries succumb to groupthink. Congress may be often structural disadvantages, diverse ideologies, perspectives make them less susceptible. Moving down to their court's answer. Courts have said that have not struck down this in the past. It's the Bradley with the TAEA we have to do breach again to solidify this commitment. This is what we talked about with the cards that I just read out perm to the counterplan. Again, they said that the normal means to their card does not say that the only way that Congress can do this is doing war. This is totally power tagging. The card says that that's not what Congress did in 1798. Prefer our recency and specificity on this argument. Again, they're saying that like basically they're saying that Congress has to go to war in order to do this, but that's just not the case, and that's not the case, because what they can do is create legislation that makes us in violation of our treaty commitment, which is Congressional Breach Act. And this is exactly what the Bradley card is talking about. And they're just ignoring what our cards are talking about. Again, they have not talked about solvency at all. So we have complete solvency. Biden followed when he's naturally inclined. The CP gives him an easy pretext to enact his agenda while dodging the blowback. The legal case, a strong president supports it, as in South African tax treaties and the TAEA. That's Bradley. It creates overwhelming political pressure for compliance. Okay, the counterpoint saw the entire app. They have not contested this.
Are you ready for cross?
Yep, just let me grab some water real quick. I'm good to go.
Right. So you say that your interpretation is simple, like, and how we don't meet. How is like a defense agreement not an alliance?
Again, because we're the way that we're defining the alliance commitment under the resolution of substantially limiting the activation of a defense pact is like specifically talking about our specific agreement to defend another nation in the terms under which they are attacked, because that actually has a way of being activated, whereas the MDA just
Okay,
exists.
so
There's no way for me to activate the MDA.
So how does your CP solve for UK pro-live?
It does, because we still functionally get rid of the MDA by domestically legislating that, saying that we're not going to share these nuclear technologies that we usually do under the
how do you
MDA.
stop the UK from prolifing?
We still access
If
the
it's just
internal link.
unilateral.
We access the internal link of your affirmative by saying that we aren't going to give them the information that they need that is necessary to their proliferation, as you stated in your second advantage. And so by them not having this information, like this is solvency in your second advantage, right? By saying that they don't have this
But what
information,
stops them
they
from
can't
like
proliferate
doing it
anymore.
in the future if the US
If that's
abandons them?
if that's what you're arguing, then you have no solvency on the case, right? Because if the US abandons them and they start proliferating, then your case doesn't solve.
How will the UK start? How will the UK start proliferating if we're pulling away from the MDA and the UK needs the US to proliferate?
That's exactly what the counterplan is doing, but we're functionally doing it from a domestic perspective and not through the international law commitment, because we're hollowing out that commitment by domestically legislating that we will not information share under the MDA. So we solve for your app. Is that time? I forgot to start my timer.
No, we have 1 minute left.
Okay.
And you say that our CP like spurs allied adjustment. How does it do that?
RCP spurs allied adjustment by still creating the domestic legal effect that we're talking about, right? And so that's the solvency on your second advantage, that if we don't give them this information, then the UK is going to disarm, and that makes France disarm. And based on like the public news cycles and things like that, the fact that like Congress is so public now means that that domestic legislation would still be perceived by our allies.
And can you talk about your net benefits?
The internal net benefit is the fact that Congress can check the executive, which stops preventative wars from happening. Like our card is specific to like what happened under the Bush administration in the Middle East, with the executive being like, oh, this is just like police action, so don't worry about it. And so Congress is going to have that ability to terminate treaties, so that the president can't just sign us into a treaty that we don't want to be a part of. Or, yeah.
1 hour sent. All right, so the order is going to be infrastructure, DISAD, Paris, DISAD, and then case, advantage 1, advantage 2.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, it'll be the infrastructure DISAD, the Paris DISAD, the advantage 1, advantage 2. Houston's good. Judges, are y'all good? All right, and Morris is not good.
Give me a second to load it.
All right, Houston is good. All right, Morris good. All the other judges good. All right, I will get started then.
On the infrastructure DISAD, I can see that there's no reason why Biden can't do both of these plans. Not going for it. On the Paris DISAD, I can see the no link that we don't have specific evidence to whether the MDA will not allow the U.S. credibility. On advantage 1, they have not responded to the warrants of the Mills card that says the MDA does not violate the NPT. 1, because they don't move or transfer in nuclear materials that's under the actions of the MDA. And 2, the Mills 17 card is specific that the MDA does not violate this treaty because it does not involve the transfer of nuclear weapons or nuclear materials. Their whole internal link to their first and second advantage is that the MDA violates the NPT. The MDA does not involve any nuclear transfer of material. Thus, it does not violate the NPT, so it's perfectly fine under the NPT. And on the link, deterrence turn on this advantage, a strong U.S. nuclear balance where there's a whole deterrence and the score against Russia, and without the lack of knowledge, U.S. response, Russia feels it's emboldened will attack the UK is causing a nuclear war because of a lack of deterrence, and they're trying to impact turning this deterrence turn doesn't apply because the UK having this turn is key, so that Britain has its own method of retaliation solely away from the U.S. so we can have an independent thing. That's a loose 08 evidence, and our prolif being good actually it will increase the deterrence because of the concept of MAD, and the C&D card on the second advantage shows that the Harris card is clearly the UK is dependent on the US for the nuclear deterrent because of the Trident and because of the information sharing. And again, so again, they don't get the internal links at all to the advantages because the MDA does not violate the NPT at all. On to the second advantage, the change of stockpile does not mean that new weapons will be built because there's no provision for saying that they have to do this. And the Harris card is clear that the response to John remains takes it the whole advantage because there's no guarantee that the stockpile will actually increase. It's just political jargon over party trying to bicker and fight. And even if you don't buy that, look at the uniqueness card that says the UK is prolifing now. That means the impacts for this whole entire second advantage should have been already triggered the moment that they begin to pull. Thus, Israel should have already struck Iran. We should have been already having a war with Russia and China. Looks like that hasn't, so they don't get any solvency because the impact should have already happened, and they can't solve. Now that we've shared this nuclear technology information, this UK, there's no reason why we can't take that back. And their own AFB card indicates that this relationship between the US, UK, and Russia relations and authorization of Russia already harms the threat. So there's no solvency because New York will be able to reduce this info sharing between the US and the UK with other influence of policy because the relations with Russia is already low. And France is never going to give the nuclear weapons because of the historical importance of them, as well as the intense support. That's the Yamaki evidence because they view their own nuclear deterrence as a key issue for them. And the beach card and the question of that why France says not will give this only about or would make them hard to them to keep them. It's this Yamaki shows that they would have to overcome the difficulty, which is to not what I see. And assuming no Israel strikes, the Netanyahu is risk averse, and there's no that's not going to be any Iran first strike Iran if they plus Iran would actually create stability in the region. That's our Ellison Mueller evidence. Specifically, the Netanyahu evidence is in context of Biden from 2021 to provide specificity on this. And again, there's not going to be any cyber impact to the China war at all because specifically cyber attacks can return to center and there's low scale impact for this, and there's not going to be an impact to the sub warfare because the tactic and be very light. All right, so and then so that's all. And then all the Ireland thumbs and Meghan Markle thumbs up don't apply because they don't even apply to the Russia or the China impact scenarios at all. So if it's anything, it's just thumping their own advantages. It's not thumping any of our offense. So on the Prolif good army, they barely answer this. Prolif is a good army. It turns and outweighs the in the entirety of the Wednesday. The Schellenberg 18 evidence really good on the question of Prolif because Schellenberg says that no nation with nuclear has ever been invaded in the 7 years of the spread of nuclear weapons and number of war-like deaths as it has fallen the battle by 95%. A specific example of the Prolif being good is since Pakistan acquired the bomb, Pakistan acquired the bomb, India conflicts and nuclear deaths and border conflict between Pakistan also decreased by 95%. And they've not addressed the warrants of these cards at all. And on the energy turn, they barely didn't address anything on this energy turn. They said it just doesn't apply. This energy energy returns all about the proliferation will decrease the cost of nuclear energy, which is key to solving for climate change. The Swashkey 16 consensus says that other countries are not allowed to enrich uranium plutonium for nuclear energy use because they were not allowed to develop nuclear weapons. And Ashkelon and the SL 19 evidence shows that the fact that the only way we can solve for climate change is because of nuclear energy due to its density, to replace Colorado emission producing. And our Ashkelon also clear the public acceptance is the only way that we make this process. Hey, global nuclear energy is used on decline now. New projects of IEA 19 nuclear power space and uncertainty about what CEDA declaration which resulted in a tons of carbon emissions. The future of nuclear power is uncertain. Raging plans begin to close, resulting in economic failure rate to like a new project and additional CO2 emissions. And states want nuclear to develop nuclear energy. They are deterred by the non-proliferation regime. Message 17. The world should be about nuclear power plants is cheap and efficient. If nuclear power would acquire the membership of the NSG, nations should be the one under the non-proliferation regime to prevent the stakes of spread of nuclear weapons and perilous of feeling progress. And proliferation is key to spread of nuclear energy. Method 17. Our byproducts of controlling proliferation is controlling the spread of beneficial nuclear energy. It's drastically helped to underdeveloped nations help cover environmental problems and non-proliferation norms hinder the development of nuclear energy. Knockable 16. Nuclear energy has been struggling intense geopolitical environment, makes the nuclear controversy more suspicious against the civilian programs and led imposition of sanctions. And again, on the stabilizing, the most important part of this whole good debate is the pull up is stabilizing and solve so every one of the impacts of the White Sea specifically. The Schneider 9 evidence talks about how any near-miss nuclear is outweighed by the fact that none of these incidents have actually led to detonation of a single device and no risk or no miscale. Mad prevents war regardless of circumstance. 11. The history of strategy matter makes serious caution deterrence and avoid miscalculation regardless of the regime type political strategy. Nuclear wars is the massive by preventing from the war. Rational calculation is more fundamental than the spread of nuclear weapons in different countries. The crucial to preserving peace. The states will be reluctant to start nuclear war because they're uncertain. Response to the one the other states is uncertainty and limited nuclear destruction. This card is talking about all the fact that we have to by more countries having nukes, then the concept of MAD is only going to apply. And they didn't address how Iran stabilizing Iran at all because specifically about this country it's talking about cooperating with each other over nuclear Iran. And I'm going to read another card on this now. Iran pull up as stabilized the Middle East, Marshall, and nuclear on Iran would possibly be the best possible result. The only likely to restore stability to the Middle East. Every time another country shows a nuclear bomb, the Middle East have always changed the level, reduce the imbalance of nuclear power state, producing more stability. The interest of the Iran nuclear Iran is gross exaggeration, supported by misunderstanding the state behavior. Iran policies made by perfectly Ayatollahs who want to survive. They show no possibility for self-destruction. Iran desires new weapon for its own security, not offensive capabilities. Iran do not close the Strait of Hormuz despite the warnings Iran's regime did not want to say that American response to cut their sons. The whole argument is that Iran politics should be good because it stabilizes the Middle East and being good in general.
All right, taking the 6:16 prep time now.
Okay, stopping prep. Put it in the chat. I'll do it. I'll do it. So it's going to be case, then the T, and then the CP.
Sorry, one more time for me, please.
Yeah. So it'll be case, and then T, and then it'll be the CP.
And did you say a doc is being sent or there's no doc?
No doc. Okay. Is everyone ready? Our plan prevents global nuclear war and is the first step of global disarmament through Article 6. Extend Joshi 20, Revcon, and Strike because this is the meeting where countries discuss their commitments to the NPT. We have a FISA time frame, only 4 months until our impact trigger because of the August 2020 Revcon. That's William 6. Chamber Button Andrews isolates the card as the MDA as a clear violation. And Action Pitlock say that the NPT is on the brink of collapse because these nuclear states think they have a right to hold indefinite nukes. If you don't vote for our plan, our alternative is widespread proliferation among Iran, Israel, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, India, Pakistan, North Korea. The plan disarms UK and keeps UK-Russia relations at bay. That's AFP 21. War with Russia drags at NATO and globe nuclear. That's been June 18. And if the JCPOA isn't restored, tensions escalate in the Middle East. And that's Chitlin Hoshi 20. We have a big attitude because that leads to nuclear extinction. That's a Beres 20. Extend Beach 9. Disarming the UK would decrease French arsenal and European TNWs, which prevents Russia miscalc. UK modernization raises Chinese militarism, such as nuclear subs and cyber attacks. That's Allison and Segal. And they say we didn't respond to Mills, but we did in the 2AC. And the link deterrence turn. The UK's deterrence uniquely links to our impacts because our Ward 16 says it deters Russia and China, and Williams and AFP indicate the new defense strategy increases tension. Prefer our evidence because it's from this year. They say prolif is good because it decreases deterrence, but extend barrage 18 deterrence always fails and lacks credibility. It even deterrence failed even in the Cold War, and it assumes optimal rationality. Changes in stockpiles absolutely means weapons will be beat. Extend AFP, which says UK increases its warheads by 40%. And they say France won't build nukes, but it doesn't matter. We still have more countries that will engage in prolif, and they say that we concede Iran produces stability in the region, but we adjust it in the 2AC, and their evidence is only from 2012. Prefer our evidence is from 2020, which says if Iran races for the bomb, US and Israel will preempt, which spills over to the Middle East, beginning with Saudi Arabia and Turkey. That's Chitlin and Hushli 20, and so prolif can't solve. They say cyber attack won't happen in China, but UK building its arsenal is exactly what triggers and emboldens China. Extend Morningstar, deployment of military muscle to China seas will raise military tensions in the Pacific. Extend Segal 17, which includes nuclear submarines, and China has hacked into the US. That's already proves that China engages in cyber warfare. Also, the UK is uniquely vulnerable because of the pre-delegation. They can act on without authorization. The authorization only falls to the captains. The energy turn has no internal link. It only says that it can reduce the cost of nuclear energy. There's no policy that's going to be put in place that actually aggregates the efforts to solve climate change. That means they have no access to their impacts. For the T. Our topic is entirely topical. They say that the topical apps have to reduce alliance commitments by limiting the conditions of activation. They keep saying that MDA is a defense agreement and that we aren't alliance. Morley 14 specifically says it's a mutual defense agreement that develops defense plans that makes U.S. alliance working together by U.S. aggregation of our defense capabilities. Miller 8 says that MDA controls joint targeting and policy planning for nuclear response and attack. That means it's a definition of an alliance pact. They say rap harbor evidence is negative evidence that we read and they have to defend each other in state of attack. They completely misread it out of our CI. Rap harbor says defense pacts are often characterized with promised aid, and the definition is narrow and specifically bounded. Some defense pacts only apply to certain contingencies, and interpretation of the pact, we interpret our pact for Britain to be focused on why the and there's 3 reasons why our interpretation is better. It's key to predictability, promise and lies. We don't do the UK MDA. We put together mutual plans, and we clarify we don't go to war automatically. That's how defense treaties in the 19th century, modern treaties don't work like that. Our argument is to debate the subtleties of diplomacy, how these things operate in the real world. If we see treaties that things over time, we think it's more predictable for people to debate, more important debate because it's how alliances, diplomatic nuance debate. There's no existing treaties where we'll go to war for treaties invoked, use 2 parties to go into conflict with another. And do world policy predictability. It's world policy that's better. We should debate things that read the world, not make the things be easier for debate. And their interpretation makes all over limits Japan, SOCO, and Philippines have as non-topical. Their interpretation of the pacts. And moving on to the CP. From to both, there's no reason that both the USFG and Congress can enact a plan. Their CP only says eliminated commitments to the MDA. That means we're not severing a perm to the CP. There's no functional difference between the two. The perm is just one way the app can take place. This plan is a prerequisite to the CP. Solvency deficits. One unilateral withdrawal can't solve for UK prolif advantage. Extend Williams. Boris Johnson wants the bomb. Unilateral withdrawal. NATO and unilateral withdrawal causes NATO and Japan to build their nuclear arsenals, which leads to a higher chance of miscount. That's a huge DA to the CP. And 2, they can't solve for NPT violations. The MDA is an internal link. 3, they can't solve if the president says no, our plan is a direct action. 4, they say they provoke allies to terminate the agreements, but that glove card only talks about how Congress has wide influence. It doesn't directly lead to it. They have no net benefit. On our entire 1AC advantage one is why the alliance is bad. They can't solve for UK prolif, which spurs Iran, Russia, and China. It doesn't matter if it balances executive balances. Countries will only care if the UK and US is still engaging in unfair nuclear weapon sharing, which is a violation of the NPT. And we don't take a stance on how the process works. The Congress can do it and whatever. Our contention is that the app only requires to defend a topical action. That process is extra topical. If the CP results in the plan, that's one way the plan can be implemented. We don't have that burden. And extend U, it says that the executive power solves terrorism, rogue states, and WMD prolifs. To presidential action is war cause. They can't even contest this in the 2. And C, and Co-18 says that Supreme Court rules can't force the executive and Congress can. And they say like no risk of miscalc, but our entire like advantage 2 talks about how if Iran starts building the nuclear weapons and Israel starts building the nuclear weapons, and that like spurs cascade prolif throughout the Middle East, which is like, and prefer our evidence is because it's newer, and theirs is from 2011, and that's their Shen card.
5:30 starting now.
All right.
Alrighty. So no new doc. Thanks, Jackson. So the order is going to be T and then potentially on to case. All right. Houston, y'all good? Cool, cool, cool. Judges? I saw you, Judge Morris. Awesome. See everyone. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. Then, all right. Then I will begin. Now, onto T. Our interpretation is simple. Topical affirmatives have to reduce alliance commitments by limiting conditions of activation. They don't meet. The US-UK MDA is not a defense pact or an alliance commitment. The MDA is a defense agreement, but it's not an alliance because nowhere in that agreement does it obligate the US to defend the UK in the event of a conflict. The resolution is clear that a topical affirmative has to limit the conditions of activation. For example, Japan can activate Article 5 to make its defense and conquers NATO. Member states can activate our defense agreements to defend the Baltics, or the Philippines can activate the MDT to defend the SCS. But the MDA has not even have a process for activation because it's not an alliance. It only facilitates sharing information in nuclear technology, which is completely distinct from our promise to defend another country when they're attacked, including affirmative that are not alliance commitments. Deletes any role for the neg debate. The two impacts are limits and ground. First, on limits, your interpretation of the topic justifies any defense agreement that we've ever made with a country in the resolution. For example, Teams Kitchen and the EDCA, which is a defense agreement between the US and the Philippines to allow for basing in the SES. Teams could read an app that ended our agreement over OPCON in South Korea, or read an affirmative that ended our defense agreement with Turkey over nuclear basing, or defense agreements to integrate cyber capabilities with Estonia. Those are important agreements with huge literature bases that are allowed under their interpretation, which explodes. The limits outweigh a smaller topic, incentivizes nuanced debates and reciprocal information and in-depth discussions of topic controversy, which is key to rigorous testing. Alternatives incentivizes a shift to hypergenerics. Debates value derives from its competitive nature because it motivates argument innovation with resolutional conflicts. The content of the topic is controlled by the affirmative, but the depth of discussion and clash is left with the negative, which means it's a good interpretation of debate must facilitate that engagement. What basically this is saying is that by exploding the topic limits, we're not able to actually engage with their literature because there's nothing we can actually generate offense on because it's not about an alliance commitment, and they get rid of all of the limits to the topic, and they can explode it. And so we'll have to do broader research instead of in-depth research, and that hurts our education. And again, it hurts our education in this round right now because we can't even go for the core generics that we're talking about, or we can't even go deep on this debate, and we went for stuff like pro-live good because we don't actually have any actual clash on the dissets because they're just gonna no link. Okay, underground, their interpretation allows for affirmatives to strategically no link every topic DAs because teams do not have a reduced alliance commitments. For example, the deterrence and assurance DA are based on our defense agreements to defend a country. For example, if we don't defend the Baltics, Russia would attack, or if we don't defend Japan, countries would proliferate. That does not apply to this affirmative because ending the MDA keeps our defense agreement to defend the UK. In a world where this affirmative, we still defend the UK. This justifies teams breaking tiny nuke untopical apps in quarter semis and finals of CEDA that not only spike DSATs but also K-links and other critical advocacies because they skirt the topic controversy, like the security K that specifically talks about how we shouldn't have to defend other countries or defend against other countries because we see them as other. That is lost under their topic or under their interpretation. Prefer our interpretation because it actually deals with the education that the topic implied, because it talks about the activation of a defense pact and activation or reducing alliance commitments through activation of a defense pact, and their definition of alliance commitments does not include defense pacts at all. Their own card, the Miller 8 specific, or the Rapp Hooper card specifically says that those two, that even though one is a subset of the other, that the subsets are not interchangeable, and that the entirety of the topic should be about defense pacts. Okay. Again, they talked about how they meet. They do not meet our interpretation of the topic. Yes, the MDA is an agreement we have with the UK, which is in NATO, but it does not mean it's an alliance. Our evidence is very clear that defense pacts and limiting activation must be the promise to defend each other in the event of a conflict, which is not the MDA. The framing issue here is that in the world of the app, the UK can still activate Article 5 of NATO alliance for any reason, which proves that the MDA is totally separate thing from our alliance to defend them. Alliance commitments are defense pacts to support each other when attacked. That's our Wu 16 card, and that, against their counter interpretation. We did not misread the RAP Hooper evidence. It specifically says that security guarantees are a part of defense pacts, but they don't change any part of the defense pact or the security guarantee, which means that they don't meet their own interp. The 2AC says, quote, defense pacts are specific founded agreements of military cooperation, but none of their evidence even says the word military cooperation or anything about the aft. That means there's a precision DA that they didn't talk about on their counter interp if they try to explain their counter interp for allowing their affirmative, because it's not justified by a single piece of evidence that either team has read and allows for completely arbitrary versions of the topic that are contextual to how the legal scholars and experts define alliances. They say that we overlimit. We don't overlimit the topic. The four core topics, Senkakus, Baltics, the SES, burden sharing, enlargement, our interp allows for basically every policy after this turn, and besides the one that still aren't blatantly about alliances. They say that our interp means that Japan and Philippines and South Korea are not topical. That's false. We have alliance commitments to defend all of those people. The Japan, we have an alliance commitment to defend the Senkakus. The Philippines, we have the Mutual Defense Treaty, which specifically obligates the United States to come to their military aid in the event that they are attacked. And South Korea, we specifically have the same thing with NATO and the Baltics. We have Article 5 of NATO that specifically says that if one nation in NATO is attacked, that we have to come to their aid militarily. Limits outweigh even if innovation and learning about things like their app is good. The next structural inability to prepare on a wide topic outweighs any of the impact they should have to this argument. Again, it's about depth of education and not breadth of education. They say reasonability. They didn't answer any of our arguments here. They said that they're more real world. One, they're not reasonable. And offense proves in the combination of all reasonable acts is untenable for the neg. 2, subjective and arbitrary mandates and judge intervention, which destroys the activity. 3, real world. There's only one correct definition of a defense pact. Reasonability is illogical. And 4, T debates are substance. Understanding legal standards and comparing is real world education and understanding like what things mean under treaties, and like that's why we have like T and like have these definitional debates, because we have to actually like understand what these things actually mean, and specifically like people interpret the Constitution all the time to try and find the definitions. T comes first because it's in round abuse and it sets a precedent for how topics will be interpreted in the future.
All right, taking the rest of the prep now. Okay, that's the end of my prep. So quick roadmap will just be case and then T. Is the other judge ready as well? All right. So, wait, where's the timer? One. Prolif advantage. The U.S. Okay. The U.S. and UK are currently engaging in the NDA, which shares nuclear weapons tech. This undermines the NPT as the NBA engages in loopholes, proliferate, causing unfair standards. If any state acquires nukes, then all other states will seek them as well. Nuclear proliferation ensures nuclear war, and that's our bearish card. Removing the nukes that the UK are relying on will solve our impacts by improving our relations with both China, Russia, and Iran. And to the UK advantage, AFP says that Russian ties with the UK are nearly dead because they want to rebuild more nukes. That's by completely repealing the NDA, it'll make Britain lose access to their nukes because our CN card specifically states that the UK is dependent on the US for its nuke systems. Then we'll improve our relationship with Russia and prevent an all-out nuclear war. The U.S. renunciating and says that the NDA will set a great example for nuclearized countries who will then follow. And this complete renunciation of nuclear arsenals from all countries will solve prolif. Also, they didn't even talk about our impacts or anything. They didn't talk about our extinction impacts or anything like that. And our entire China scenario in their 1NC, their 1NC, their 2NC, their 1NR, and their 2NR are contested. They literally dropped all of our arguments. They have no defense or offense against it. They can't win on that. Their only response is that their 1NC words 8 card said that cyber threats are imaginary, but our entire second advantage scenario disproves this. Second advantage, third scenario disproves this. Just look at it. This was uncontested in the 2NR. Yeah, because they didn't contest our impacts in the 2NR, which was a horrible mistake on their part. This means that the plan can be enacted with a 100% probability and magnitude. For you to vote neg means that you believe that the defense analyses, nuclear studies, research studies initiatives, and the political science association are insufficient. And for you to vote neg also means that you're allowing for nuclear proliferation to continue and for us to have extinction events as cited in our 2A or 1AC. And onto T. They say that we're not an alliance commitment, but Morley 14 specifically says that the two countries allow the control of nuclear technology. Prefer our evidence because it's from the consultant of arms control. The US-UK is referred to as a special relationship for a reason. It's a cooperation between the United States and the United Kingdom on nuclear matters, and that's Miller 08. They say that they have to do broader research and not in-depth research. Breadth is key for education. It provides better context and follows topic literature better. Broader education about US commitments, Trump education about NATO, both for real war education and for preventing a stale topic by next week. And key for fairness, we maintain limits. I'll expand on that later. And onto grounds. They say that somehow we can somehow no link for everything, but they bunch a read of off against us. This means that they still have ground for our 1AC. This is no excuse. Since it's the CEDA, this is the last tournament of the year. We've been running this app since the beginning of the year, and we've even debated with you in the same 1AC. And I've even seen Jackson Posey see me debate in the yesterday, so he knows what my arguments are. Yeah, he knows what my arguments are. They say that subsets are not interchangeable with Rap Hooper. This flows af because mutual defense is alliance. They say that we don't specifically say that military cooperation. We don't specifically say that it's military cooperation, but treaty obligations are narrow. Defense means that defense doesn't just mean that one promises aid to the other. That's Rap Hooper, and they do over limit according to the counter interpretation. Philippines and Japan are not alliances. They can see that this puts them in a double bind. Either they're right and there's no topic, or they're wrong and we have to be topical. Vote them down. There's no mutual security treaty to the U.S. Yeah, whatever. We have no in-run abuse. You get to do all these different disads and CPs. It's not our fault that they didn't do the research. And there's 3 reasons why our interpretation is better. 1, it's the key to predictability. These treaties are vague and promise alliance. We do that with the UK MDA, and we put together mutual plans. How we clarify that is that we don't go to war automatically. That's how defense treaties in the 19th century worked. Modern treaties don't work like that, like South Korea or Japan, like they talk about. they're wrong about our argument is to debate the subtleties of diplomacy, how these things operate in the real world. If we see these treaties as things to see over time, we think it's more predictable for people to debate and more important to debate because it's about alliances, diplomatic, and about diplomatic nuance debate. There's no existing treaties where we will go to war if a treaty isn't invoked. And it's good to debate our apps because the topics in of itself are important because it's our oldest diplomatic alliance with our biggest ally. No one talks about it. We need education. It's what we need to talk about. And nuke stuff is secret, and we need to be talking about it. And subpoint B, app credibility and flexibility also protects our core grounds. They're our biggest nuke partner. This in no way is different from other renditions of the NATO AF.
Great debate, everybody.
Good debate, y'all.
Great job. I'm sure we'll be back shortly. Let's wait on see the president. Oh, there he is.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Do we have the debaters from Houston? All right. So just making sure we've got everybody. Perfect. Hey, congratulations to y'all on making it all the way to the finals of the Novice Breakout of the 2021 CEDA National Championship. Congratulations, y'all. And on behalf of all the people who tuned in everywhere, thank you. This was a fantastic debate. Winner of it was congratulations, y'all. I'm going to turn it over to the panel, but congratulations again.
I don't have any. You want me to start?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. I voted negative primarily on the activation level of this argument. I felt like the 1 in C had a separate definition. The violation of activation is clear each time. And I thought that Houston did a pretty decent job of demonstrating that there's more than one way to think about defense pacts and that there might be some educational benefit to considering defense pacts as something larger than security guarantees. I do think definitionally you can do it in a more limited way. That's a possible interpretation too, based on Liberty stuff. But regardless of whether defense pacts should be broader, I don't feel like Houston has an explanation for security guarantee would be additions for activation of such a defense pact. And so I basically process this as there's 2 layers of topicality argument, and on the second one, activation really has, in a direct sense, a counter interpretation. Now, I do want to nuance it. There is kind of an implicit sort of counter interpretation that's kind of going on, but I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it, and I'm just not giving Houston much credit for it because I don't feel like it's unpacked very much. The closest thing that I think Houston has here in the rebuttals is this card that's really tagged as an over limit card that says that it says essentially that defense pacts are not automatically self-activating, that the United States still, but really both parties, but at least the United States is reluctant to commit itself to like guaranteed action. So in theory, if like somebody sort of says we're under attack here, in context with our constitutional processes, we can decide what actions, if any, we believe are required or appropriate under the defense pact. So it's not automatic activation. But see, I don't think that the negatives interpretation is that activation has to be like automatic. I feel like when the negative says that Japan can activate over the Senkakus or Philippines can activate over the SCS, that I'm expecting in the particulars of those examples. And so I can't decide if you're trying to say that like activation just isn't a thing and that the counter interpretation is to just like ignore all those words in that part of the topic, or if you're trying to say that activation is some kind of a specific thing without a card that says what activation is. But I just kind of feel like it's not, in a conventional sense, a developed counter interpretation, and I can't really decide what your interpretation is supposed to be. So I think if this topic was solely, if this violation was solely about the defense pact, yes, no, it's an incredibly close debate. And the reason it's so incredibly close is because the affirmative is doing a very good job on alliance education is important. You specifically say that it outweighs NATO education, but I don't feel like that's super responsive to the ground limit stuff. And I do feel like the -1 limits snowball past 4 additional treaties to like kind of all the treaties, but like how that weighs against alliance education is the part that I still would like grapple with. So, but for activation, I'm not actually sure who I'd be voting for here. It would be very close and honestly a little too subjective, but I thought it was super easy to vote negative given that I didn't feel like Houston had a counter interp for activation.
Can y'all hear me? Everybody can hear me? Great. I don't disagree much with Irmo at all. I actually felt like if I had to decide this debate, I would have thought that the AF was a defense pack. But I think Irmo's right in the sense that this activation piece is not really answered very well. Of course, that's impacted by this limits argument. And I also found the precision argument to be very persuasive. With that being said, I just want to give you all some advice for the affirmative. I think that you should, besides doing this activation stuff, I thought there was a potential way to win this debate, and maybe it's ticky-tacky for me. I don't have any negative speech saying that topicality is an a priori issue. And so to me, if you can win that the discussion of the affirmative is valuable, even if it is untopical, that could be a reason to vote affirmative. And I think you have some of this stuff going on, just kind of in the broader scheme of why it's good in the context of this resolution. I think if you were to make some larger arguments about why this discussion is valuable regardless of the resolution, then you might be in a really good spot for me. But I don't want to beat a dead horse in terms of this activation stuff, because those were most of my comments. For the negative, I will be honest, and maybe the strategy was to go for T. I kind of saw that, but like, I don't know what this counterplan stuff was. Maybe more case debate would have been sufficient. It was very clear you weren't going for the counterplan at least. And I just didn't understand the links on the disad, but that might be the point. At least extend the no link arguments that they have as abuse on the topicality argument. Otherwise, it just seems like part of the 1NC. You wasted a little bit of your own time when you could have probably diversified your options, if that makes more sense. And so, yeah, great job to everybody and congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the exact same thing in terms of the activation stuff. It seems like you won that you are a defense pack, but that doesn't solve that you don't necessarily have a clear activation point. I think that's easy enough to answer. Like, you could argue like the condition is that we will never do it. We reduce it to never. So there are ways to address it, but it just didn't seem like you were interacting with that specific violation argument. I think I did hear the 2NC at least say that topicality comes first. I didn't hear it clarified in the 2NR. But I think that that is a really important thing for the affirmative to be able to think about. Like, you are making offensive arguments on the T flow, but I don't get to access them because it's not what it's about. You don't make it the case versus T. You just use the case as somewhat trying to answer T, but it doesn't overcome the fairness and the limits kind of arguments that are the impacts for the topicality. So I think you could have had more ground there. I also thought that the 2AR just made kind of the like, come on, judge, like, this is like arguments with like, you've watched me before, we've debated you with this app, we've been doing this all year. Those arguments are typically compelling to me as a judge, because I do think that teams do have this kind of burden to reciprocate or to respond to things. And especially if you've been given multiple chances, like, why not do the research to answer their arguments? I also thought that the negative block telegraphed the topicality, and so it surprised me that the 1AR didn't allocate a little bit more time and substance to the topicality. As far as the negative block, I probably would not have kicked out of the Paris disad, considering I don't think that the 2AC responses were very good on that argument. I think you could have got the 1AR to have to spend some time there to set you up for going for the T. Yeah, I think that, excellent debate. I think that both teams maybe rely a little bit too much on the speed of their arguments and could do a little bit better job of kind of being articulate on some of the key points of the debate. So I think, especially for the affirmative team, you could have slowed down this debate and won it on a few important points rather than trying to keep up with the coverage and the line by line of the negative block. Thank you all and congratulations.
I would also echo that for the 2NC on T. You kind of, because it's blocked out, I feel like you've read it a little bit like a card, and it was a little hard to keep up with, and maybe that's why I didn't have that argument explicitly flagged. But yeah, like I said, great job. Doesn't matter. Congrats on the CEDA championship. Getting in the finals of CEDA is amazing. You all should be proud of yourself, and I hope that all of you come back to this lovely activity because we need you. Thank you.
I hear you. Yeah, very much so on that. So
thank you all so much.
Really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good debate.
Thank you so much for your feedback. Good debate, Houston.
Yes, good debate.